It's game week for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Let's go. Akron is just a few days away, and they will be playing on the banks of the Olentangy River. Hi, everybody. Matt Goldman here. You're watching the Ohio State Football Report, and our goal for this video, and let's get as many likes as possible. If you bleed scarlet and gray like me, like this video. Show your support for the Buckeyes that will be taking the field this week. It's going to be sold out, the Horseshoe. Over 105,000 will be in attendance. Can we get 105,000 likes? That's a lot of likes, so not sure about that, but let's try and support the Buckeyes as much as possible. But let's get into what we have to talk about today. Nick Saban, this guy right here on screen, the greatest college football coach ever, who coached at Alabama, 7 national championships. I mean, talk about winning. This dude knows all about it and being a great leader. He talks about Ryan Day and his resume, about just the success that Ryan Day has had in his time. And looking at the resume that Nick Saban had from College Gameday to now, he's had a lot of success. This guy knows ball and knows how to talk about ball in the right way. So that's why ESPN hired him, and he made his debut for this season this past weekend in Dublin. So the resume speaks for itself. 7 national championships. That's a lot of national championships. That's cool with me. So if he's going to talk about coaches or a team, I'm going to listen. And I assume you would too. The expectations in Columbus are really high this year. This is a national championship or bust team. That's kind of it every year in terms of expectations. But it's even more impactful this year because of how much they went to go spend in NIL and get upgrades at pretty much every position that they needed from last year. O-line was kind of the only position where they didn't upgrade. Wish they did, but that's the reality. You can't get every single person. They got Seth McLaughlin, the center from Alabama, but he wasn't so amazing. We saw that in the Rose Bowl, the fumbled snap. So not exactly sure if that was the greatest thing for Ohio State to get. But, again, the expectations are high because of all the talent they brought in with Caleb Downs, Jeremiah Smith. This is a national championship team right here. Andy Staples went on Part of My Take, the Barstool podcast, and said that this is the national championship team. If you looked at any team in college football, this team has it all. You look at every piece that they have, from safety, cornerback, linebacker, defensive end, just on defense alone, that's a national championship defense. So let's talk about what Nick Saban said about Ryan Day this week. This was on College Gameday. I do agree that Ohio State has a really good roster, and I think Ryan Day probably likes his roster. I think the key that will drill is how Will Howard is going to play at quarterback for them, and can they manage the expectations. The worst thing for a team is to have these kind of expectations, and this is the kind of anxiety on your players that are gotta accomplish something rather than compete and go out there and play. I mean, this is a valid point, what Nick Saban said. This is a great roster. Ryan Day must be happy. So should Mark Bantoni, who's our general manager. I put that in quotes because that's not his exact title for Ohio State, and went out to get the guys from recruiting to NIL and the transfer portal, including the guys who run the foundation, our NIL and 1870 Society. So, yes, they have a really good roster. But at the same time, the expectations are so big in Columbus. I mean, the national media perception is out of the world for what everyone has for Ohio State. They're the favorites in Vegas as well in terms of betting. That's a pretty big deal. So when you have those expectations, which drove Kyle McCord out of Columbus after just playing one season, how do you go from CJ Stroud to Kyle McCord and expect, if anything, better than CJ Stroud? That's virtually impossible with the stats that CJ Stroud put up and what he's doing now in the NFL, which further proves the point. He was a special talent. So when you go from Kyle McCord now to Will Howard, you have to think, okay, he needs to be better than Kyle McCord. You can't really get much worse, is what everyone's saying. Well, we don't know what's going to happen. He played at Kansas State in the Big 12. This is the Big 10. This is a new system, Chip Kelly's offense. These are new weapons. This is a new O-line. We're not sure what's going to happen, and I am really curious to know. But we're going to keep you up to date on all of this content throughout the year. I'm going to give my opinion. I'm going to bring the facts. I'm going to bring the stats to back up my opinions. And I want to also hear from you guys, because that's the most important thing, the fans. That's what I love, getting to know everyone's opinion, because there's no right or wrong opinion sometimes when it comes to a player or a team. I want to hear how everyone thinks, who should be the starting left guard, who should be the starting nickel cornerback. That's always important. But if you really want to get in and start learning about this Ohio State football team from my perspective, hit that sub button. We just passed 6,000 subscribers. not long ago. We're on the road to 7,000. Let's keep climbing before this season starts just a few days away. So now, the pressure is on for Will Howard. Just talked about that earlier. He's facing so much hype that I don't even know how he can handle it, but I would have to think for his age and the people he has around him that he's kind of used to this. I know Kansas State's a little different in terms of expectations than Ohio State, and that's no disrespect to Kansas State. But Ohio State has been the running for a national championship before I was even born every single season. They've won multiple national championships in my lifetime. Not a lot of schools can say they've done that. So when you come to Columbus, you have to bring the juice every single game, and especially in a Big Ten where you're going to face now an Oregon team who's third in the country, who's going to be one of the toughest tests in the entire landscape of college football because of how dominant they were in the transfer portal and the players they have as well. So for Will Howard, this could be detrimental to a player and their mental toughness going into a game. Let's not forget, it's a mental and physical sport. You need to be able to come into a stadium of 105,000 or go in an opposing stadium of over 80,000. You need to be able to handle that pressure in the national media landscape coming down. Pretty much every other week, Big Noon Kickoff is in Columbus having a big tailgate show or College Game Day. That means that that's a big game for Ohio State in the media's eyes. And if Will Howard is at the top, shining in that spotlight, he needs to be able to handle it in the right way. But I want to see him handle in the right way. I don't want him to be drawn out by all the different narratives going on by fans, like kind of what happened to Kyle McCord. And I do feel bad because McCord's a great guy, and he really did help Ohio State in certain ways and won that Notre Dame game if it wasn't for him. So you can't have that for Will Howard. But looking back at what Will was able to do last year, it was pretty impressive stuff. His QBR was really good. His completion percentage was pretty solid. The yards was there. It was an okay year for Will Howard in the Big 12. He was kind of the top half of what the Big 12 needed and for what Kansas State need to accomplish their goals. It's not Ohio State level in terms of the touchdowns because Ohio State, a quarterback pretty much averages over 30 touchdowns a year. The interceptions, fine with, and the QBR rating, as I just talked about, that's good. Didn't even talk about the rushing yards for what Will Howard has done. That's all good because we know what Will Howard's figure, 6'5", 230 pounds. That's a big boy when it comes to being a quarterback. And if he's able to escape out of the pocket, that's good. With Ohio State's O-line and how I talked about in yesterday's video, kind of shaky. I don't know if I trust them yet. But what Ryan Day also, in terms of what Nick Saban said, Ryan Day was talking about on the Pat Mcafee Show, another ESPN show that Nick Saban was able to appear on while Pat McAfee was drinking his Guinnesses during his show in Dublin, Ireland. He said this: "It's hard for me to take the position to put that kind of pressure and expectations on any coach, Ryan Day included, because you never know what's going to happen. You don't know if the quarterback's going to get hurt. You don't know if you're going to lose the corners on defense, and you can't cover anybody. You have to be able to improvise and adjust and do the best you can." I personally think Ryan Day is a really good coach. I think he'll do a really good job with this roster. I mean, come on. That's a really nice compliment coming from one of the best coaches of all time. If he's able to say that about Ryan Day and what he's been able to do now from an outsider perspective, not being a coach in college football now, I'll take that any day. I will take that compliment. I will run with it. But at the same time, Nick's not inside the locker room. He's not at practice every day and doesn't see exactly what the coach, the coaching staff, and the team is seeing and what the fans are definitely not seeing. But to hear that from a guy who definitely has more inside sources than any of us do and is able to get some access, I like what I'm hearing. Again, the pressure is a lot, and for Ryan Day, that's even more pressure to know that a coach like Nick Saban is going to be watching you, and when everyone thinks you're on the hot seat if you don't beat Michigan and lose for a fourth year in a row, which I really hope doesn't happen because that would really not be good, and that would cause some issues within Columbus. But that's even more pressure added on, and I think having Nick Saban be able to say that should calm down some of Ohio State fans' narratives and just be able to realize, okay, we're in good shape. If you want the Buckeyes to beat Akron, they're 15.5-point favorites in terms of the spread. That's a lot of points. If you want to beat them down, the Zips, the interstate rival, let's give this video a like. Let's get there as quick as possible before game day. I want over 100 likes before game day happens. That's going to make it much more fun for game day. In the Scarlet and Gray faithful, let's get it going because, come on, Ohio State's back. College football is back. We're the Big Ten. We're not the SEC. We're a little different in terms of our fandom, but we're just as passionate in terms of our teams. We might not have the same in terms of talent in some of the teams, especially the lower teams in the conference, but we're still the Buckeyes. We're still the powerhouse of the Big Ten. So let's show all the other teams who we are in terms of our fans. But let's look at Ohio State's schedule now, kind of talking about the expectations of what's expected for the Buckeyes. They start with Akron. Then they have Western Michigan. Easy opponents. Marshall, let's include them in there as well. The non-conference schedule, not that strong as compared to the last few years. They had Notre Dame on the road last year, so now they take it a little easy this year. Do I love that? No, but their conference schedule got a lot harder, and that starts with Michigan State. Michigan State might be the worst team in the Big Ten this year. Bottom three, definitely. Pretty much entire new coaching staff after Mel Tucker was fired. They went out and pretty much got any player left available for them in the transfer pool that wasn't taken by any other Big Ten team. I think Rutgers got like a lot more players in terms of the transfer portal. And then they have Iowa and Oregon. Iowa, 25th in the country. Okay, they're pretty good. We know that defense is some of the best in the country. We know they had a great punter last year, but we also know they scored like 3 points a game. So I don't know if I would worry about them as much. The next game, that's where I worry. Oregon. Oof. Going to Autzen Stadium, October 12th, projected night game on NBC. Oh my. Now that's going to be fun. Don't get me wrong, but that's also going to be really scary. This is the biggest game in the regular season, all of college football. Out of any team, conference, schedule, this is the biggest game, regular season-wise. It doesn't get better than this. This might be the first out of 3 times Ohio State could face Oregon this year. But starting on October 12th, this is where the real season starts. This is where we know if this Ohio State team is legit or not. This is also where we know if Dylan Gabriel and this Oregon team is legit or not. So the second half of the season, it starts with Nebraska. And Nebraska is going to be very interesting. But Ohio State could start 7-0. Dylan Raiola and this Nebraska team have a pretty easy season going up towards this Ohio State game on October 26th. He's got all the hype in the world. He was once committed to Ohio State, once committed to Georgia. I mean, this guy has committed to multiple schools, gone to 4 different high schools. This guy has kind of traveled anywhere he wants. Then they go to Penn State. We know Penn State's a good team. They return Drew Aller, Nicholas Singleton, and a lot of talent. And they have Julian Fleming, who transferred out of Ohio State, who will be their wide receiver 1. But I don't know if Penn State's it. I think the hype is too much for Penn State. I don't think they're that team once again. We saw them get blown out in the Peach Bowl to Ole Miss. It just showed that, one, an SEC team is dominant against the number 3 team in the Big Ten. That wasn't a surprise to anybody that it was just Ohio State and Michigan and nobody else at this point in the Big Ten. Then it's Purdue. Purdue, again, I think will be a bottom 3 to 4 team in the Big Ten along with Michigan State. Don't think they have the talent to do anything. Northwestern should be an interesting match. That game will be at Wrigley Field in Chicago, so neutral site, but they only moved that game because Northwestern's makeshift field is 3,000, and they know Ohio State could fill Wrigley with 50,000 fans. So that's a game that they want to just bring more money in, so I don't blame them. And you know what? National audience, let's go blow out the Wildcats. That game should not be a struggle. Indiana, the week before in Columbus. Come on. Like Indiana, do we know what the Hoosiers are about to be like this year? We don't even know who their starting quarterback is going to be. Like they have no clue what's going on in Bloomington. That game should not be much. And first off, November 23rd, week before Michigan, you know this Ohio State team is going to be just doing anything at all to throw Michigan off and kind of running whatever they want because they can. They can toy with them. And then the last game. Oof. I don't know if I could handle 4 losses in a row to the team up north. I went to school for 4 years at Ohio State. They ducked Ohio State in COVID, lost the last 3. That was a heartbreaker to deal with that and watch Michigan win a national championship. Don't get me wrong, Michigan was a great team, but that game is critical for the Buckeyes. And looking back at the Ohio State-Penn State game last year, the score doesn't really indicate in the stat line for Penn State what the game was like. That was a garbage time touchdown. So the game was really a 20-6 score, going to the fourth quarter, and they got a garbage time touchdown with Theo Johnson, who's now a New York Giant. But looking at the stat line quickly, Drew Aller, 18 for 42. Come on, look at that completion percentage. That's not good at all. 191 yards. Again, that was mostly garbage time. Kind of Ohio State was just playing a soft zone at that point. Nicholas Singleton's a great running back, and they play a good running back by committee at Penn State. So I think he should be a player to watch out for. Keandre Lambert-Smith, get out of here. I'm okay with like, Ohio State's cornerbacks can do whatever they want, and Julian Fleming, they know how he plays. So not really worried about their weapons in terms of what they have. Ohio State, all three players that led the way in rushing, passing, and receiving are gone. We know what MHJ is all about. Mine Williams, we wish him the best and hope he makes an NFL team at some point. Kyle McCord's at Syracuse. That's all good. But this Michigan game, going back to it one more time, because we know how important it is to beat that school up north. They cannot lose this game this year. One, they're home. You can't lose at home once again, especially in this rivalry. Don't you want High Street to be stormed after and everyone goes crazy and storming the field and everyone goes to High Street and just hangs out, has a great time? I haven't personally had that feeling ever. My parents didn't get to have that when they went there. They never got to beat Michigan. So why can't this happen this year? I'm planning to go to the game. I need to be there to make sure Ohio State wins and to cheer them on. But this Michigan team has arguably two of the best players in America in Mason Graham and Will Johnson. They're projected both top 10 picks in the NFL draft. Mason Graham, I think, is the best player in America. I hate saying it, but it's true. He's a force to be reckoned with off the D-line. Will Johnson's a great cornerback, not the best cornerback in America. That's Denzel Burke for Ohio State. The Michigan game is just 95 days away. I can't believe it that I'm even saying that we're under 100 days away. They have that countdown clock in the practice facility at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. They also have it in the locker room at the stadium. That countdown continues to roll. Every time you leave that locker room, you see up top how many days, how much time until that Michigan game. But the Buckeyes, their season starts in just 4 days. Come on, let's go. 3:30 Eastern time. They will be live on CBS. We'll be watching the Buckeyes run out, and it's going to be great. The weather should be good, too. So, when the weather's nice, that makes it a little more fun for everybody just to watch the game. But that's going to be all on today's video. If you enjoyed today's coverage, just make sure you like. But more importantly, give me a follow on X or Twitter. Still, don't know which one to call, but that's all good with me because we all know which app we're talking about. Elon Musk, he named it X, but I kind of like it as Twitter still. I miss it that way. But anyways, you want to DM me, you want to talk to me about some Buckeyes on YouTube, on Twitter, or X, hit me up. Go Bucks. We'll see you tomorrow.